Welcome, everyone. We are so honored to be here at COTESL 2024 with our presentation, Global Engagement on the Virtual Stage. First, we'll just introduce ourselves. I am Monica Baker. I'm joining from New York. I'm an elementary ENL teacher. Anastasia.
Hi, I'm Dr. Anastasia Khawaja. I'm an assistant professor in Ramallah, Palestine. Jane?
Hi, I'm Jane Hoelker. I teach writing at Nazarbayev University in Astana, Kazakhstan. Mary?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Hillis, and I teach at a university in Kyoto, Japan.
And so we'll begin our presentation by talking about the acronym JEDI. Anastasia?
So we're going to start with justice. Now, justice is not just looking at, what is right and what is wrong, that kind of binary. Justice goes beyond, and justice looks at why the systems in place that may oppress are in its place to begin with, and justice takes away those oppressions. So for example, this graphic right here, you have the reality, which is these boxes which are stacked up with one man and like hardly anything for others. Equality, everybody gets the same thing, but if everybody is starting in different levels, it's not going to work. Equity, which is what we'll talk about in a second, where everybody is able to start on the same level, but there's still a wall in place. Justice wipes all of that out. But let's go ahead and move on to equity. So equity, I love this graphic because it shows that equality, as I showed on the previous picture, equity gives everybody what they need. So again, we're not talking about justice where that wall is away. We're talking about the man not needing a box, the girl needing two boxes, and the boy needing a wheelchair, not a box. It's not going to do him any good. And I love this quote by Mary Jean Latendre, who says, "Excellence in education need not mean elitism, and equity need not mean mediocrity," which means we're not talking about only the best or the most elite get education, but also we're not saying that with everybody on the same level, we're not lowering our standards. We're still keeping those same standards, giving everybody a fighting chance. Let's move on to diversity.
So the D in JEDI stands for diversity. And as you can see the quote on the screen, diversity is about all of us and about us having to figure out how to walk through this world together. So diversity, as you can see from the graphic on the right-hand side, diversity is not just about our ethnic background. Diversity is about our age, our geographic location, our cultural background, our socioeconomic status. It's our identity, it's our culture, it's everything that we bring into our community. Next slide, please.
Okay, and finally, we have inclusion. And you can see this quote here about inclusion. Inclusion is not bringing people into what already exists. It is making a new space, a better space for everyone. And this is illustrated through the circles here on the right side with the different colored dots inside. You can see the inclusion one. Everyone is all mixed up together. There aren't any groups of similar dots grouped together. So this is kind of a framework we've been using to look at our different environments. And Anastasia?
So TESOL put together a white paper on discrimination, and it was released in November of 2023. And a group of us were on this team, and we were able to pull from all of our different networks to get feedback on what diversity, equity, inclusion, and access mean, and what TESOL has and what TESOL needs to do better. And so these are just some of the things that TESOL has said that they would do, including providing welcoming spaces, both in person and in the virtual convention, working with legal advocates to address concerns, and supporting identity-based communities of practice, increasing advocacy efforts in our whole association. Next slide, please. And this just gives a couple of quotations from the white paper where we're talking about the need for equitable access, celebrating and championing diversities in multilingual English speakers and their lived experiences, but also advancing the profession through research findings and classroom practices. And when we're looking at JEDI or DEIA, it's a process. It does not end, and it has to be adapted depending on what kinds of situations and what kinds of things are happening in our ever-changing world. Next slide, please.
So today we're going to highlight 4 different unique ways. We obviously represent a wide, diverse demographic, the 4 of us here today, and we're going to highlight ways in which we are using JEDI practices in our different educational and teaching contexts. So my part of the presentation focuses on the question, would families attend virtual bilingual programs? Next slide. So I'm always looking for ways to get parents more engaged in their students' academics. And I had done a survey back in 2019 and asked the multilingual parents in my school district if they wanted more programs to be able to better support their child's literacy development. You can see the results. Overwhelmingly, everyone said yes. Next slide, please. So here was the original plan in order to provide parents with more programming to support their children's literacy development. I had planned a bilingual story hour that would be kind of like a library kind of story hour, very low key, a book presented in both Spanish and English because my students are predominantly Spanish speakers, and then a little crafter project. And the plan was that we would hold these in the school where I teach in elementary school once a month after school. Next slide, please. However, what happened was, this was 2019 that this plan was made. Obviously, 2020 was COVID, and so everything changed. We could not carry out the plan as originally scheduled. So we came up with a revised plan, and the revised plan was to bring this program online to see if parents would still engage in discussion about how to better support their child's literacy development online. And so I asked the parents, are you interested? Would you come to a Zoom if we tried to do it on Zoom? I asked them what day and time they preferred, and I collected materials, dropped it off at everyone's houses, and I made it very casual, no official sign up. I said it's going to be completely bilingual, and I said, let's see what happens. Next slide, please. And so here were the weekly components. Every week on Wednesday at 8 p.m., we would do a story in English, a story in Spanish, the same story or a different variation of the same story, and then a related craft or project. Plus, we'd have some time just to talk, to share. I could relay any important information to parents, and I could also model some best practices for literacy development. Next slide. So here's some pictures of what transpired. The kids came, and their parents came as well. The unique things that happened were kids brought siblings. Instead of just my group of students showing up to Zoom, as you can see in the picture, there are older kids, there are younger kids, and parents joined in as well. Even if you can't always see the parents in the actual Zoom boxes, there were always parents around chiming in from the background. Sometimes I'd see like grandma in the kitchen cooking dinner, and she'd pop her head in and participate a little bit as well. So it was really a beautiful thing that included all different members of different families in my school district. Next slide, please. And here are some of the projects we did. The kids got very creative from their homes, using resources they had at their homes. We did a bridge building challenge that tied into a book. We drew beautiful pictures tied into whatever we were reading about. And kids used both English and Spanish to talk about their projects. And the best part of the projects was that they were really collaborative. Families got involved. Families were all working together to problem solve and make these beautiful creations. Next slide, please. And so what were the wins of having a virtual family program? Families show up every week, and I continue. This program started in 2020 during COVID, but now we're way past the time of quarantine, and yet this program still continues. It's been such a success. Families kept showing up, so I kept doing the program. Kids started to ask if they could read. They would volunteer and say, hey, Miss Baker, can I read a page of the book? So that was an unexpected win, that kids were engaging so much that they wanted to be full-on participants and readers. And like I said, babies showed up, toddlers, grandmas, everyone who was in the house started to get involved in this program. Also, because of the time of day that we did it, 8 o'clock at night, kids wore pajamas, and it made it really personal and special. And it felt like a bedtime story in our houses together. Next slide. And so why did this work? This goes back to the JEDI principles. It was an informal program. It continues to be very informal. There's no sign up, there's no registration. Families know it's bilingual, so they know their language is going to be celebrated in this environment. It's inclusive, everyone can show up. And it's also fun and it's predictable. Families know each week what they're going to get when they show up, no surprises. Next slide, please. So if you are considering something like this, a virtual engagement program, just some quick things to consider. Definitely know your families, ask them if they want this kind of program and ask them when it would work best for them. Really important to create a low stress, welcoming environment that highlights personal connections and also celebrates culture and language with very open communication, easy enrollment or no enrollment so that everyone can join as they are able to. Next slide, please. And finally, we end with just a quote from one of my students. She said, "I love Wednesday nights. They are special because it's like Miss Baker is in our house reading us a bedtime story and mom listens too and helps me with the art project." So that kind of highlights the program that I developed in New York to include families online in a virtual space. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Next, I'm going to talk about virtual guest speaker events at a self-access learning center at a university in Japan. So the context is quite different, but the same principle of extending learning outside the classroom and the principles of JEDI also apply. So what I'm going to talk about is this self-access learning center has a focus on international exchange and language learning. And this used to be a purely physical space. However, during the pandemic period, the services were all offered online. And after we returned to face-to-face classes, some virtual elements remained, especially the virtual guest speaker events. And this is what I'm going to focus on today. So, the online modality of these events offered several advantages, which you can see here. They are to build diverse communities of learners around common interests, and second, to connect students across borders. And these borders might be between different classrooms of students, between our various campuses of our university, or even across different countries. And finally is to take language learning outside of the classroom. And this point of creating communities is especially important. If you look at the slide here, I have a quotation from Kubota, which says, "Traditional ways of English language teaching and learning may not always enable learners to communicate successfully with diverse others because human communication involves more than linguistic knowledge and skills." So students need more than just language skills. They need to understand others, the diversity around them, and how to convey meaning through mutual accommodation and respect. So I would like to introduce a few of the example events which we held. And some of these were organized by teachers and others were organized by students. So that's a really another unique point is that teachers can collaborate or students can collaborate to organize these kind of events at the center. I've chosen these because they fit our theme of JEDI and also they were successful in terms of attendance or student feedback. So one teacher organized event featured a Japanese man who is working at an international agency in the Gabonese Republic, and they're doing work distributing developmental aid and economic and social growth projects. So in general, students enjoy learning about other cultures and the working environment and daily life there. And this presentation was conducted in simple English and is related to SDG 10, reduce inequalities. And next, another teacher-organized event was a session on leadership by a business executive from the US. And the percentage of female executives in Japan is about 15%, which is well below OECD average of about 30%. And finally, two student-organized events included a virtual event on Black Lives Matter and a hybrid event on Palestine. These are both related to SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. and these were conducted bilingually. So although there tends to be a sentiment there that we don't have any racial discrimination or problems like that in Japan, in fact, the survey results shared by the Mainichi show that ethnic Korean population in Japan does face discrimination in school, work, and online environments. So these are just a few of the examples of guest speaker events. Guest speakers help students to understand these issues and give background information about them. And students had an opportunity to ask questions and discuss these topics with other students. So the key points here are collaboration. As I mentioned, they're organized collaboratively by teachers and students. They involve interaction, so students are talking in breakout rooms, asking questions via the chat or in advance via social media, and by collecting some feedback from students in order to improve future events. So in virtual environments, a key point is connection. And we hope that by providing the opportunities for students to share their opinions, that they will be able to communicate more successfully with people around the world. And next, I'll turn it over to Anastasia.
All right, thank you, Mary. So my example also, by default, really follows the JEDI principles, given the contextualization of where we are, which is Palestine. As you can see, there's a map here. To my left, you see one from 1946. You see all of the old villages and all of the old governance. And then from 1947 on, you see how Palestine has slowly but surely have been disappearing due to military occupation and oppression for so many decades. Next slide, please. Just to give you a general idea, of course, you know that at least for the past 6 months, Gaza has been under some very heavy conflict. And the map to my left is really kind of where the checkpoints are, roadblocks, etc. This was before October. And then if you move to the map to the right, this was around, I think this was taken around December. And you see so many more checkpoints, roadblocks, security. And we're not talking about just in Gaza, we're talking about in the West Bank as well. Because you see there are many, if you see little triangles, those are settlements, and those are actually from settlers and other people who come over into the West Bank to come to live and to settle, which continues to appropriate and take over Palestinian land, which will also cause conflict, which will also cause a lot of volatile situations with soldiers, with Palestinians, with all involved. So what happens in education? And I wanted to show these maps to you because I want to show you where and how our students at our university, they have to travel. So our university is in Ramallah, but we have students who are coming from Nablus, from Hebron, from Al-Quds or Jerusalem, from all over. And if you see all these different roadblocks, checkpoints, partial checkpoints, and they've gotten even worse since especially October, the traveling is very much a challenge and can very much differ by the day, by the week. And so we have to offer, where we can, virtual options because education has to continue. It is one of our last forms of peaceful resistance here. Next slide, please. So we utilize alternative taxonomies. As you know, we have Maslow's and we have Bloom's. And, during the pandemic, we talked a lot about Maslow's before Bloom's. But what happens when you are perpetually in a state of Maslow's? You have to make sure your students are okay. As you saw in the maps, if you have students who are coming and they're crossing checkpoints and having to deal with all these different factions before they even get to university, our students are not okay. Our faculty are not okay. So how do we teach students who are not okay in general? And so we have different types of taxonomies, and I love the taxonomy by Dr. D. Fink, where she talks about the taxonomy of significant learning. And there are aspects of course, learning to learn, foundational knowledge, integration, application, but you've got caring and you've got human dimension, and within the center is that convergence. So you have to take that caring human dimension, all of that into consideration as you are teaching, as you're approaching lesson planning, as you're approaching students in general. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you just some general ideas of how we create comfort in the classroom, whether they are virtual or whether they are coming into our classroom, whether it is hybrid. We really want to make sure that our students are feeling secure and feeling like it is a place where they can just kind of, at least for an hour or however long our classes are, just to kind of rest their brains a bit. And this was from the first day. I just want to draw your attention to this little comment here. I think English class will be my comfort zone, NGL. It means not gonna lie. So you could see right away with our approach, you could see students are just like, they were just, very comfortable and kind of getting into the space together, whether virtually or hybrid. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we could use Menti. We could utilize different platforms and things to get students to come together. So what is the most important thing for world peace? We were talking about the SDGs, as Mary was talking about earlier with her organization in Japan. Next slide, please. We also use Padlet in order to talk about these SDGs and said, why are these important, and why, which aspects of the SDGs do you think are the most important, and which ones are the most important for Palestine? And as you can see, freedom for education and rights, humanity, aspects of poverty, justice. You see the ones that students are really gravitating to for the most important SDGs in our region. Next slide, please. We also had graduate students. We have graduate student classes where they are critiquing articles. While these are medical students, they are the future of medicine here in Palestine. And you can see how they can work even in a virtual platform. Next slide, please. So virtual options are crucial here. They allow students to continue their education with little to no disruption. Zoom, Mentimeter, Jamboards, Padlets all help facilitate information because safety and security of our students are a top priority. Now, we try to be in person as much as possible, but all of us are ready at any time to jump on Zoom. We have those backup plans. And, when our students come to us, as my boss have really trained us and taught us to say, when our students come to us safely, we say, Alhamdulillah as-salama. And that just means basically, thank God you are safe, because it literally is, it is a challenge, and there's a modicum of danger even to travel to get to university. And of course, when it's too dangerous, our virtual options are open. And as you can see, there's no stopping our students. Next slide, please. And in closing for my section, I want to share these two pieces of art. One is by Haba Zagut, and one is by Dunia El-Almor, Allah Arhaman, to the martyrs. They were killed in Gaza during the conflict, and we will not see their artwork anymore. Next slide, please. Free Palestine, Save Gaza. Thank you so much. On to my colleague, Jane.
Hello, everyone. Excited today to talk to you about how virtual spaces create global connections and share discussions through the Nazarbayev University Writing Center, built just 12 years ago in the middle of the steppe, along with the city of Astana. Next, please. Why is shared space needed, and what happens when it is provided? Well, Wenger tells us that shared discussions need a particular space to interact in a combination of familiarity and excitement. Kanagarat, the UK, who use their own varieties of English and shared practices, not so much a shared grammar, to achieve their goal. Haneda talks about the identities of mastery the participants develop as they change while participating in shared spaces. Next, please. We discovered that 50% of our NU students eligible to use the Writing Center choose the virtual space. This includes undergrads and graduate students. Next, please. Now, the virtual students end up with the same situation as the face-to-face students. They have their instructor of choice, they have the same length of session, and their draft is imported into chat or screen share. We have challenges working within our enclosed physical site that protects us from the winter. We have a 5-story atrium, the length of 6 Olympic 50-meter pools placed end to end. This takes care of 6,000 students and more than 600 faculty plus staff who are navigating the central corridors. The students much prefer to jump onto their computer to engage in their writing center, to jump onto Moodle to do their homework, and to jump onto the next class, especially if they're in the very large classes of more than 100 students. They can do this in their own room. So there's the need to create many virtual spaces within the enclosed, intense environment that protects us from blizzards, weather on the steppe, measles, or COVID-19 pandemics. Next, please. Well, the shared space. The shared space gives us a chance to practice discussions that support a culture of writing across the university. We teach rhetorical strategies. These turn words on a page into a compelling dialogue. The writing instructor builds trust, understanding, and connection in an environment free of judgment, and this fosters writers' agency, according to Howard. They're shy, talking to the writing center tutor about their text compared to talking to their course instructor whom they see every day. We also operate within an environment, within a trilingual environment. Russian, the first language, is the guest language, and Kazakh, the second language, is the heritage language, and English is the third language. Next, please. Now, our multilingual graduate students need their own space. Writing tutors are needed who are knowledgeable about the graduate courses and the instructed expectations. We have an increasing number of multilingual graduate writers at NU every year, and this is happening globally. So they have a need to cope with graduate discourse and the new learning context. They're assumed to be successful writers at this level, yet they have writer needs, and there's a growing awareness of this need. So as they wrestle with challenges, as they adapt to nuanced, discipline-specific language, according to Dobson, we have to meet these needs. Next, please. Here are a couple of examples of visual literacy practiced by our students as they Next, please. And they now have a space within which they can share these artistic expressions as well as their writing expressions. We have Angime published now, a trilingual literary journal. This means conversation in Kazakh, and they share the uniqueness of the Kazakh multicultural context. I would like to read you a short story about a Korean woman who was forced into migration with her family by Stalin years ago. We were thrown into cattle wagons and traveled for weeks to unknown destinations. Then they dropped us off somewhere in the steppe where only one Kazakh family lived. My husband was killed. I was with 2 children and expecting a third. It was the end of autumn and the weather was turning cold. When they saw me with 2 children, the family gave us the yurt and went to live in a barrack. They are the reason we managed to survive. Next, please. So I ask you, is not NU the perfect space for a writing center? Because who would not be inspired to write while watching the sun rise over the space of the Kazakh steppe? Thank you very much.
So as we reflect on the different presentations, or really across the globe, we really range from all over the world, and our stories are so unique, but they are united by these JEDI principles. And so let's review them really quickly. So we have diversity as global connections and sharing diverse perspectives. Mary, what is equity?
Equity is opportunities for networking and sharing of best practices from around the world. Monica.
Next, we have inclusion and access, which is choosing platforms and applications that are available worldwide in order to localize our connections. And Jane?
JEDI is a process, and looking at virtual spaces through a JEDI lens, it is crucial that we continuously reflect on the progress, ask for feedback, and act on feedback and make changes where necessary.
So thank you so much for joining us for our presentation today. We appreciate you being here. And if you would like to connect with us, please scan the QR code on the screen and you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. And finally, our references are on the screen right now. Thank you.
Thank you.